In this episode of Cycling Tours, I will explore the cycling network within the northern sector of Yishun. Good day everyone, it's me, Transit Evolution, and we'll be taking a look of how it feels to cycle in the sprawling new town of Yishun in this video, particularly in neighborhoods 2, 3, and 4, all located towards the north and east side of Yishun. This video will start and end at the MRT station in its town center. We will begin with a glimpse of Yishun Avenue 9, right in the heart of neighborhood 2, briefly in the form of a separated cycling path, before it quickly merges back with the footpath after passing a couple of trees. The path meanders a little, jutting outwards every time I pass a previously constructed staircase. But other than that, it looks just like what you would expect a typical Singaporean cycling path being built in this day and age to look like. This path conveniently leads to a Heartland Mall, Junction 9, but at the moment, the cycling path along Yishun Avenue 9 ends there and does not carry on any further, although there are more public housing even further to the north. This leaves a significant northern part of neighborhood 2 without wider paths that are more usable for cycling. I will now fast forward to Yishun Street 21, one of the narrow neighborhood streets that can be found in old public housing developments. With low traffic volumes, this street is very quiet and conducive for cycling. Traffic lights do exist to aid students of Yishun Primary to cross this two-lane street, but because of its narrow width, they are not essential. Up ahead in Yishun Town Secondary, a zebra crossing is all that is needed. It is very easy to cross the street mid-block, even without the aid of any pedestrian crossings. Now I will return to the town center in preparation for the next phase of this video, taking this time to talk about Yishun in general. For those of you who aren't locals, Yishun is often deemed a meme of a town here, dangerous, weird, or cursed, as if it's the Florida of Singapore. Whether that's true or not in reality is subject to debate, but what I would say is this: Yishun is indeed very special, perhaps unprecedented even, when it comes to having a strong active mobility culture. Near the town center, you can see an insane, by Singapore standards, number of not just acoustic bicycles, but also power-assisted bikes, personal mobility devices, and personal mobility aids. I will refer to them as e-bikes, e-scooters, and e-wheelchairs for the rest of this video. There truly isn't anywhere else that's quite like Yishun in Singapore when it comes to the extent to which electric devices are used. Jurong isn't like this, Punggol isn't like this, even Tampines isn't quite like this, much less Ang Mo Kio or Bedok. This is thanks to its extensive cycling path network. It's good to see such a vibrant active mobility culture, though of course they do come with downsides. Pedestrians may find that these people are travelling too fast and passing them too closely to feel safe walking around. These are valid concerns here, especially because many of the paths are meant to be shared and are not dedicated infrastructure. Others may find it annoying to hear people on active mobility devices blasting musics of all sorts of genres as a substitute for ringing a bell. What they do add to though is a very distinct street life. So if you are a tourist who wants to see how true blue Singaporeans live their way of life, don't visit Marina Bay and don't visit the ethnic districts in the city fringe. Instead, visit Yishun. One does not simply tour around Yishun without travelling along the entire length of Yishun Ring Road, the concentric road that binds all neighbourhood centres of Yishun together. I will begin at the same intersection which I traversed from in the cycling tours video for the western sector, but this time in the opposite direction, eastwards. There's a moderately steep upslope here, but no worries, it's not hard to surmount. Passing the Yishun Gardens precinct, I enter neighbourhood 2, mainly completed between 1984 and 1985. It also hasn't even been long, and I'm already passing my first neighborhood center of today, Nee Soon East Courtyard, comprising 291 to 293 Yishun Street 22. For some reason though, it was decided that the cycling path along Yishun Ring Road will follow its inner edge, rather than the outer one, even though most of the neighborhood centers are located along its outer edge. Hence, getting access to the neighborhood centers from the cycling path will require crossing this 4-lane road to my left, which is not a big deal given the presence of many signalized intersections, mid-block bicycle crossings, and informal crossings as well. It also helps that the traffic engineers from back in the day do not misuse turning lanes and slip lanes unless they are necessary to accommodate the required traffic flow, which makes the crossing distances near intersections shorter as well. To make crossing Yishun Ring Road safer, there's even an effort to convert this northeastern stretch of Yishun Ring Road into a 40 km/h silver zone. This is mainly done by doubling the width of the road median from 0.6 to 1.2 meters, giving pedestrians more ample room to wait along the median before proceeding with the next stage of their crossing. It also narrows the road lanes from 3.7 meters to a more reasonable 3.4 meters. Couple that with the use of speed tables, or what Singapore call bus-friendly humps, and traffic will be calm. It is however unfortunate to see the use of green fences or roadside greenery to impede more spontaneous road crossings, forcing pedestrians to use those at designated points. Passing Yishun Huts and crossing Yishun Avenue 9, I leave Neighborhood 2 and enter Neighborhood 3, with the Neighborhood Center Junction 9 to my left. Unlike older centers, this one comes in the form of a mall, though it is also a mixed-use development, with 9 residences condominium sitting directly atop and the Yishun Green Walk Public Housing Precinct wrapping it, completed in 2014. This is where I will point out that Yishun Neighborhood 3 is interesting in that it was built over an extremely long period. Unlike Neighborhood 2, where all the housing blocks were completed in 2 short years, Neighborhood 3 took decades to shape into what it is today, and it has housing blocks of a variety of different ages. The blocks fronting the street on my right, 309, 310, 314 and 330 Yishun Ring Road, are all infill developments built in 1994, older than the slab blocks directly behind them, blocks 312 and 329, which were completed in 1986. You couldn't even tell that because they looked like they fit in so nicely. In the same Yishun River Green Precinct alone, we have housing blocks built in 2 different decades. Here, I approach Sungai Khatib Bongsu on an extremely narrow sidewalk that should be widened, and we briefly approach a newer part of Yishun. Yishun River Walk to my left and Yishun Natura to my right were completed in 2014 under the current build-to-order scheme, which has spawned even more public housing sprawl in the far east of Yishun ever since, such as Yishun Glen, completed in 2022. Then, I passed Yishun Glory, completed in 1988, and before long, we are back in the realm of old public housing on both sides of the ring road again. This is where we get a glimpse of the old cycling path design, and I find it appropriate to explain how the cycling network here came about, in case you haven't watched the other videos for Yishun. The old part of Yishun East saw grey cycling paths constructed under a contract RP228F, awarded in 2013 and completed in mid-2015. Mainly along Yishun Ring Road. Yes, this road. In 2021 though, many of the paths here have resurfaced with the new rate design, although it seems like a few of the paths were left forgotten. This was done in either contract PL188 or PL212 by contractors who also worked on the paths in Taman Jurong and Bukit Panjang respectively. However, there are also certain newer parts of Yishun which have cycling paths that were built together with the main roadway, right from the start, which you will see in a few short minutes when I deviate from Yishun Ring Road. A shared path design was used when a covered linkway was built in 2021 to connect this bus stop with Yishun Park Hawker Centre. This was done as the pillars for the linkway would reduce the overall clear width of the entire pavement. For some reason, there was no interest in building another pavement to create dedicated separated paths for pedestrians and cyclists. Passing Yishun Avenue 11 with the Jade Spring Precinct on my left and Yishun Park to my right, you can see a wide variety of active mobility devices being used here by both delivery riders and regular people like you and me to get around this sprawling town. This town park will not last for long though, and I will soon pass Park Grove, with many housing precincts with Grove, Breeze, and Spring in their names to come. At 675 Yishun Avenue 4, the precinct center of Fern Grove, my cycling journey along Yishun Ring Road ends. To continue the journey, you can watch the cycling tours video for the southern sector of Yishun. For the rest of the video, I'll mainly be covering cycling paths to the north and east of this place, starting with Street 41, where I pass Dew Spring and Vista Spring. These are newer housing projects along newer and wider streets, and can sense a difference as the streetscape becomes less lively, with slightly more liberal use of slip and turning lanes along the roadway. I will also note that it takes 16 minutes to get here from Yishun MRT station, on a route similar to Feeder 804, taking 10 minutes and also stopping at this bus stop. Of course, it is not the most direct cycling route possible, but it gives a good picture of how long it takes to travel to various amenities along Yishun Ring Road by bicycle. I will now travel along Yishun Avenue 1, continuing from where I left off in the video for the southern sector. Yishun Avenue 1 is a 60 km/h major arterial road, meant for vehicles to travel at a high speed, around the periphery of Yishun, so don't expect anything interesting for the rest of the way along this road. However, people do live along this roadway, such as in the case of Orchard Spring, so it is also essential that the needs of pedestrians are also considered here. One thing noteworthy about Yishun Spring, a precinct of old blocks buried behind these new ones, is the presence of a recently painted shared path connecting a parking lot to another parking lot, meandering right through it. It is not connected to the broader cycling network and hence will not be featured in this video, but perhaps you can expect a short form video featuring this bizarre path that can only be found in Yishun. I have just passed GEMS World Academy, an international school, and as I approach Meadow Spring, things start to get confusing, as all possible iterations of stay on track and shared track signs are placed as if this is a competition to collect them all. What happens here is that the cycling path switches color to the less distinctive grey, and also switches side to be further from the road than the footpath. That's because these paths were older, dating back to about 2017, and built together with the roadways here, at a point in time when Singapore was transitioning to the current red design. We will encounter a lot of these sorts of terrible paths in the far eastern part of Neighbourhood 4, which are practically indistinguishable from the footpath at this point. Passing Forest Spring and Melody Spring, Yishun Avenue 1 comes to a right turn onto Yishun Dam, but for this video, I will instead be turning left onto Yishun Avenue 8, briefly away from the cycling path network as I cover a couple of paths in the estate at the extremities of Yishun. I'm now travelling along Yishun Street 44, a lifeless 4-lane road which is only here to improve vehicular connectivity for this estate. If we evaluate streets by level of service, this could be a grade A. But if we evaluate them by how attractive they are for walking and cycling, it might just be a failure, even though it comes with footpaths and cycling paths. The presence or absence of infrastructure alone does not magically make a place walkable. Adjacent developments have to sensibly interact with the street at the eye level, which is not happening here. The same goes to Street 43, though at least Forest Spring has shops that are worthwhile to go to. Still, this street is under constant neglect, and you may as well be quite literally anywhere. Back on Yishun Avenue 1, I turn right around Yishun Avenue 6, where the cycling path is slanted towards the roadway, which will reduce traction with the tires of my bicycle. I took special care to slow down at this turn, as I actually skidded and fell off my bicycle over here in an earlier attempt to make this video. This might be caused by the mold and dirt which accumulated on the path over time, due to the path being slightly lower than the adjacent grass. So each time it rains, a little bit of mud splashes onto the path and hardens as the water on the path dries up. There aren't many cyclists in this part of Yishun, which results in the accumulation of such debris here. When the ground is dry, they will appear as brownish and blackish colors on a red cycling path. When the ground is wet, they may appear like puddles that fail to drain away. Now, there are quite a few signalized T-intersections along Yishun Avenue 6, such as this one in Yishun Street 42. One travel hack which pavement cyclists can use to speed up their commute along the main road is to cross the intersection twice, when the traffic light is green for motor vehicles on the side road, like what this cyclist on the slip lane at the other side is about to do. However, for this video, I will not be executing such a move. .461 Yishun Avenue 6, the multi-story car park of Blossom Spring, serves as its precinct center, with a couple of shops and eateries that enliven this otherwise dead estate, and I'm passing it right now. Because the precinct is built at a higher elevation than the road though, it may be difficult to discover what's on its storefront from the street level, without doing any prior research or purposely heading up the stairs or wheelchair ramps to visit the stores yourself. Here, I pass Valley and Grove Springs at Yishun and enter a construction zone, as public housing here is still on the pipeline to completion. The quality of cycling infrastructure takes a downturn near construction sites, so pardon me as I meander through some temporary paths on the way to the northern corner of Yishun. Passing the future Yishun Boardwalk Precinct and crossing the river, the cycling path reappears again along the Symphony Suites condominium, this time on an unusually wide pavement that encases a canal leading into Sungai Khatib Bongsu. It then narrows to a shared path as I cross Yishun Avenue 9. It's worth noting though that I will soon be heading into the industrial heart of Yishun, where public housing and condominiums make way for huge industrial complexes like North Point, Northview, and a posh Beast Hub. These multi-story complexes have become prevalent in Singapore's industrial landscape since the 1990s and come with ramps similar to a multi-story car park that provide container trucks direct access to factory units on higher floors, thus enjoying the convenience of operating on the ground level, but also under all weather conditions while optimizing land use. Now, the shared path narrows even further to a footpath here. I do find it odd that the current priority for cycling infrastructure is to build it in residential areas, while industrial areas are neglected. This is especially when industrial areas tend to have worse public transport connectivity than residential areas, given that the transportation demand only spikes during peak hours and is very uneven throughout the day. Given the poorer public transport service there, people will actually be more willing to cycle as a means of travel in industrial areas, especially during off-peak hours. This is why I find it perplexing that the 3 cycling towns in Singapore that have yet to have cycling paths announced, Tuas Joo Koon, Sungai Katuk, and Loyang, are all large industrial areas. Here, I'm about to cross Yishun Avenue 8, originally planned as a semi-expressway linking Admiralty Road West with Seletar West Link. This is decidedly a road, and nothing is meant to be interesting here. I find it strange though that opposite this road, a shared path has been built right next to the military training area of Simpang. This path was constructed pretty recently, but because it links nowhere to nowhere, it is very poorly utilized, and worse still, poorly maintained. In just months, a significant portion of the clear width of the path has been covered by rotting, muddy debris, like dead grass and leaves. This is one thing that we have to keep in mind when building cycling infrastructure. What use is building a wider path if a significant part of it ends up being obstructed and rendered less useful? To treat walking and cycling as serious modes of travel, it is essential to treat the conditions of paths as seriously as roadways. Paths should be kept clear for passage. Since we are technically in Simpang, I just want to take a minute to mention about how this could have been a new town. In 1990, the Singapore Institute of Architects and Housing Development Board were pit in a competition to come up with separate plans on how Simpang New Town could look like. They were displayed in an exhibition in September, followed by a public dialogue in November. A geomancer even gave his feedback, likening Simpang's land profile to that of a monkey holding a melon. The Urban Redevelopment Authority will eventually combine both plans and propose new housing forms, like marina housing with berthing space for boats like Sentosa Cove. Its town centre will have a resort character like Pasir Ris, wrapping around a waterway like Punggol. Natural landforms like a big feature along Sungai Simpang will be retained, and so will the natural mangroves of Sungai Khatib Bongsu, until a reversal in plans for the conservation area in 1996, where it was partially destroyed to make what is now Yishun Avenue 8 straighter and speed up car commutes. Of course, the plans for Simpang were eventually scrapped due to a financial crisis, and Simpang remains largely forested today. Next up, we shall head on to Khatib Bongsu Park Connector, the exact spot where mangroves were destroyed to improve traffic flow. This brief path segment from Yishun Avenue 8 to Avenue 6 was a later addition when Yishun Avenue 8 was constructed. Beyond Avenue 6, the park connector was originally built in 2007, following Sungai Khatib Bongsu, Yishun Central, and the North-South MRT line, before ending at the intersections of Yishun Avenue 1 and 2. At Yishun Avenue 6, the park connector rises to meet the road level, and I have to make a detour to get to the mid-block bicycle crossing. Now, Khatib Bongsu Park Connector is technically not one, but two park connectors running on each side along the canal. This is one hack used by the LTA to get to the promise of building 1,300 kilometers of paths by 2030 under the Island-wide Cycling Network program, which comprises both the park connector network and the cycling path network. Since there's a path on both sides of this canal, they can double count the length of the paths here, about 1.9 kilometers worth, bringing us ever closer to the arbitrary 1,300 kilometers target. However, I will not be travelling on both sides of the park connector as if they are separate paths. For this video, I will travel the full length of the path along the west side of Sungai Khatib Bongsu, passing the Yishun Green Walk precinct, and only ply the east side partially later on. I will take a brief break from talking until I reach Yishun Central so that you can have a feel of the ambience along this park connector. I have now reached Yishun Central. We'll briefly cross this narrow bridge in preparation for the next phase of path traversal along Yishun Avenue 11, which features a separated cycling path along the Adora Green precinct. Now, I did mention in some earlier videos that I like this path design as it provides a safety buffer between pedestrians and cyclists, provided they stay on track, while helping to preserve trees. However, given the way they are implemented here, they do come with problems as well. For example, this cycling path is suspiciously narrow, much less than the bare minimum of 2 meters required for two bikes to pass each other comfortably. Given the prevalence of bulky e-wheelchairs in Yishun and the fact that they will be speed limited to 6 km per hour in the near future, it raises concerns on whether faster mobility devices will be trapped on such narrow paths. There are also many minor deviations along the cycling path, since it has to be built to adapt around existing trees and utilities, rather than the other way around, as they will be done in the case of road widening. Shared zones with pedestrians are often used unnecessarily near intersections with roadways, and the paths do not continue across side roads. Put all these together, and you end up with a cycling network that is not very cohesive. You can see how such imperfections disappear when the cycling path returns to be directly next to the footpath, as I pass the Yishun Jasmine precinct. Once again, passing the Canopy and Lilydale condominiums, the cycling path is built on the green verge, since land cannot be taken from the adjacent condominiums without costly land acquisition, and there's a reluctance to shrink the vehicular realm to make room for cycling. We encounter the same windy path issue, and that's what happens when you adapt the cycling path to the contours of the roadway instead of the other way round. This is not desirable at all for what is meant as a two-way bike path, as it increases the risk of conflicts when two bikes pass each other from opposite directions. It is hence a shame that this is the quality of the bike path for what is meant to be the most direct route from the Yishun town centre to the far east. Now, we are back along Yishun Street 42, which wraps around the Casa Spring and Blossom Spring precincts. The grey paths here are almost indistinguishable from the footpath, which is bad. There's not much interesting to talk about here, though this vicinity is slightly more interesting than that of Street 43 and 44, given the presence of Everspring Park at Yishun and its little playgrounds. Still, the roadways to my right are way too underutilized. Reducing the road width from 4 lanes to 2 lanes will enable a more equitable use of public space that makes this vicinity more walkable, while potentially freeing up enough fringe land that could even be used more productively for even low-rise residential and commercial developments, or at the very least, physically separated cycling paths away from the footpath. I now travel along Yishun Street 31, a narrower 2-lane street. Not much going on here, but you can see how there aren't traffic problems just because the roadway to my right has 2 fewer lanes, going to show that it isn't essential for all neighborhood streets in Singapore to have a minimum of 4 lanes, even amongst the newest housing developments. Now at this point, I'm almost done with covering the cycling network within the northern side of Yishun, and the only path left is along Yishun Central, which I shall get to using the park connector on the eastern side of Sungai Khatib Bongsu. In these final minutes, I just want to provide some closing thoughts about Yishun. Now, residents of Yishun would know very well that it has a weak point when it comes to transportation options here. Many of the streets and avenues in Yishun East are served only by feeder buses, which only pumps commuters into and out of the town centre, and nowhere else. This makes it a pain to get between various points within the town, or to trunk bus connections towards the east side of Singapore, which all plies a limited number of bus corridors. Admittedly, a comprehensive cycling network has shown itself as a good substitute for last-mile commuting to get to amenities and these major transport nodes by providing a level of flexibility for commuters that just can't be achieved with buses. But I would still hope to see a more robust bus network that doesn't rely as much on a web of feeder services that also provide more direct connections to towns to its east, like Sengkang and Punggol. The high volumes of e-wheelchairs and e-bikes buzzing around as compared to many other towns, reflect this desire for more direct public transport connections that are currently poorly served by the bus network. While the promotion of active mobility is noble, it's always good to remember that there will always be segments of the population that are unable or unwilling to cycle, and the last thing we want is for them to rely on cars, where the bus network failed them. As for the cycling network, it's pretty comprehensive for a town in Singapore in this day and age. Not quite serving everywhere, and not quite on both sides of the road yet, but they do provide decent town-wide coverage. That's only possible because of the current focus on building paths for quantity instead of quality. However, because the paths are built for the sake of providing a certain width and not necessarily with much capacity and safety metrics in mind, some parts of the network might have already become too overcrowded and dangerous for its good. For example, this shared path near Yishun MRT station along Yishun Central is often filled with e-wheelchairs and e-bikes moving about in uncomfortable proximity, outnumbering pedestrians at times. This is because it is the most direct route between most public housing estates in Yishun East with Yishun MRT station, so all commuters travelling inter-town using a bike-train modal combination would use this path. Moreover, it is next to North Point City, the mega mall in the town centre, from which many delivery riders will spawn from. There are limits to path sharing, and in this case, a physically separated cycling path buffered away from pedestrians will be more desirable, safeguarding the pedestrian realm and keeping conflicts to a minimum in an area with high footfall. From Yishun Street 42, it takes 17 minutes on the most direct cycling route to Yishun MRT station, comparable to the 16 minutes required by taking feeder 801, excluding wait and walk times. What do you think? Does it speak volumes about the potential of bicycle commuting, or about how slow the bus is? Anyways, at this point, I'm approaching the end of yet another cycling tours video. If you got any thoughts, do share them in the comment section below. You can also support me using the memberships or super thanks function of YouTube. This is Transit Evolution, signing off.